Welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. I'm delighted to start this new series. I'm calling it the Principles Project. What I've discovered is the power of principles and what they do for you. And I discovered to my astonishment that I have not systematically tried to pull together all the principles that I know that are out there in the world, which I've been trying to implement principles in my own life to some extent, but on many things I've done this wholesale study of things. I've never done that for principles. So I'm in the process of doing that. And I want to do this as meetups. So every Saturday I will do this. I want to start off. So the idea is to take systems of principles to guide your life. So the context will always remain the same. What principles do you need to guide your life? And we're going to take different systems of principles, integrate it with other systems, try to organize them and proceed from there. Okay. So we'll take up things like we'll look at, all the principles of Jordan Peterson, all the principles of Aristotle. Anywhere we can find principles, I'll get that. I want to do this in a crowdsourced way. I'm going to start asking you folks, what principles do you live by? What principles have you found useful that have changed your life? Or what principles do you depend on all the time? And get the conversation going and move forward. And what I'm doing is that I'm going to pair it with a blog post. So you can go, it's there in the meetup description. You can go ahead and add your comments there. So for each week, I'll have a different blog post. And then once the video is done, I'm going to post the video also there in the post. So there is a continuous conversation going. Okay. So what I want to start this off, this is episode 1 of the series. I want to start off with my best thinking right now on principles. And with that, so I'm going to share the screen here. Let me see. I've been working on this 4 functions model, which I think is the best, which I know has been the best in my books. I find it the best way of understanding all of human condition. But thanks to my diving into Buckminster Fuller and systems thinking, I've been able to radically simplify it. I think radically simplify it, and I find this much more useful. Actually, this diagram captures a lot more things than I did in my four functions quadrants. So I'm going to go ahead and describe this diagram. Okay, and I'm going to talk about, so this is the diagram, and if you scroll down on the page, you can see these are the 6 principles that relate to the diagrams. So that's all I have as a core thing that I'm using right now. And I'm going to present the diagram and those 6 principles, and then I'm going to invite comments on that. Okay, let me go ahead and make sure I have the, give me a second here. John, can you do me a favor? If somebody is in the waiting room, can you let them in so I can focus on this? John, are you there?
Sorry, I thought I hit on mute. Will do, Shrikant.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. Okay. So let me begin. I'm going to make a very bold statement. Aristotle called man a rational animal. I think it is better to call man a designing animal. Okay, and I want to explain the concept of design and how it brings together everything that is human. So I regard designing as being quintessentially human, bringing together all the other faculties that we need to bring together. So firstly, let me talk about what do I mean by design? By design means you decide what your purpose is. There are 3 parts: purpose, plan, and principles. It's like, what do you need to do with your life? How are you planning to do it? And by what principle are you going to operate? So that's the design. This is again, this is a big revelation for me, because the most influential principle for me and most influential thinker for me has been Louis Sullivan. And his principle is form follows function. And I have been astonished that every time I can use that principle anytime on anything, and it produces just astonishing results. And now this kind of explains to me why. Because what it is that it's a design principle, it's a principle of design. It says, bring together everything that you need to do. Is how you're planning to do it, does that match it? And you keep on updating your design to match the requirements of everything, everything that needs to be done. um, so design is all about saying, what is your purpose, what is your plan for achieving it, and what are the principles by which you operate. Okay, that's the concept of design. Now, this diagram, it's a graph, and each of the lines that you see going, there is energy flowing on each of the lines. So for example, your actions should be guided by your design or by your plans. At the same time, there are feedback mechanisms. So the round lines are mostly feedback lines. So there is kind of feed forward. So what you're doing is that you have this system one and system two. System one is the intuitions, system two is the deliberation. This is what your psyche is capable of. You're using both of these things together to form the designs, and you're acting based on the designs. And then you are taking feedback from those actions, both getting intuitions about them and deliberating about the results of the actions to rework the design. So there is a continuous flow that is going on between in that. So that's one. That's kind of the primary energy circuit that I see, that you form a design through use of your intuitions and deliberations, and then you set it in action, and you use the feedback from the actions using your intuitions and deliberations to redesign and act. So there is this continuous loops, two loops going on like that. That's the simplest structure that you see. Okay. In addition to that, there are feedback loops happening within this system. So there is a feedback loop when you're designing something. When you design something, you'll have intuitions about, is that design right or wrong? So there is a line going between the design and intuitions. So there is a action going on around that. You're also doing, there is a line going between design and deliberation. You do a design and then you deliberate about it. Is this the right structure? Can this be like this? Why is it here? What are the limits of this? This is all deliberation of that, which is shaping the design. So there is back and forth going, lines going between that. Similarly, actions, it's not one way. As you take actions, you're comparing it against the design and maybe modifying the design while you're acting. So there is a back and forth going in that direction. There is also interesting um, interaction going on between your intuitions and your deliberations. You will have intuitions, and you need to kind of let your intuitions express themselves fully without inhibiting them. And then you need to switch gears and you have to deliberate about it and figure out whether those are real, those are objective, those make sense, which of them make sense, which of them don't make sense, which of them need to be modified. So there is a line, the curved line going between deliberations and intuitions. Okay. There is lines going between action and deliberation. When you're actually acting, you're deliberating. In the process, there is a curved line going between actions and intuitions. As you are acting, you're intuitively saying what is right, what is wrong, and you are making corrections. So there are all of these lines that carry energy, that are um, that are guiding your action. But the centerpiece of that is the design, is the plan that you have, is the principles by which you are operating. It's the purposes that you're trying to achieve. That's the design. That is the result of all the deliberation and intuitions you've done. That is informed by all the testing that you have done through actions. And so that's why that is the centerpiece. So this is the first level. Now, the second question is why are there two circles here? So far, everything I've described is for a single individual. It's important to realize that we operate in a social context. Take a social context as, for example, a context of a family or a business or a country or civilization as such. Okay. The actions that you're taking impact and are interacting and operating within the context of actions of people around you, whether it is a family or business. The intuitions that you have, there are other people who have intuitions, and you owe it to yourself to be able to have, take in those things and deliberate on those things, and compare it to your intuitions, compare it to your designs. There is deliberating processes going on by people around you. You need to take that in if you want to do the most of your life. And the design that you have for your life has to fit in some way, has to relate in some way with designs of the overall group within which you are operating. It can go against the grain, but then that is part of the design too. So there is, you can look at it as, so that's the distinction between my design and our design. And this R, you can keep shifting from, you can look at it as another person. Suppose you're dealing with another person, the R just includes what you're doing with that person together. And you will find that, for example, maybe their intuitions are better than yours. Maybe your deliberations are better. Maybe your ability to do actions is better. Maybe they have a better sense of design about something. So you are actually interacting with all these four things with another person. So you can look at it first at a level of just another person that you know. You can look at it within a family. You can look at it within a business. You can look at it within an industry. You can look at it within culture as such, a country. So it's a model to kind of think of, not just because you cannot really understand your life or lead your life by being blind to what is around you. You operate within that. It's a system. So again, thinking of it as systems, with Buckminster Fuller, it's kind of inside and outside. So this, think of it as, don't think of it as two different things. Think of it is like inside of the system and outside of the system. The outside system provides a context for the inside of the system. Same kind of principles are operating within, same kind of principles are operating outside. And there is an interaction between the inside and the outside. So that is a quick description of this diagram. So what I want to do now is I want to open things up for questions. Give me a second. I'm going to go to participant windows here. So what I'm going to do is that I'll take some questions about this diagram, just clarificatory questions. What you're trying to do is I want to make sure that it is clear what I'm saying with these diagrams. I made several points. I'm saying there are four different things going on. There is design, which is a core thing, and then that is being supported with these three spokes of action, intuitions, and deliberation. So that's one thing I'm saying. Second thing I'm saying, that this is going on within a person, and this is going on within the social context within which a person operates. And that social context is variable. You can substitute different social contexts for it. So that is my basic way of thinking about human beings. So before we go to principles that are operative here, I'm going to open it up and have answer any questions. So if you have any questions, go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat. Okay, any questions, anybody? All right. No questions? All right. So I'm going to go ahead and I will talk about the 6 principles I have about these 6 things. So firstly, what are these 6 things? There are these 4 major functions: design, action, intuitions, and deliberations. And then there is about yourself and about, civilization, about the R. So what are the 6 principles I have for each of them here? Okay, so let's start with the R. Okay, the idea of R. So I'm saying that regard all of world civilizations across history as you are. Okay, so let me elaborate on that. Okay, I think this is one of the main problems that many people face because their concept of ours is too narrow. Now let's start, at the evolutionary history. In evolutionary history, we evolved in tribes, and everybody within a tribe was our R, and everybody outside was not even considered. They were considered as an enemy. Okay. Now, with Buckminster Fuller, he talks about the traders, the great traders who kind of went over the ocean and connected these different cultures, who were able to see similarities and differences between groups of people who lived far away, and were able to kind of take a comprehensivist view, able to integrate kind of both material and ideas across these cultures to produce something spectacular. What I'm saying is that the wider your R is, the more more things you're going to be able to take in and use as material for your own life, whether it is intuitions, whether it is deliberations, whether it is designs, whether it is actions. So having that R as wide as possible, that is good for human beings. So this answers the questions about there are this kind of tribal mentality of saying my group versus ours is very deep in our psyche, and it comes from our evolutionary heritage. But that doesn't really, it's not something that is good for us. So this first principle is about that. Okay, so now I'm happy to take questions about any of these principles as and when they occur, but try to keep it to questions. Okay, Laura, what's your question? Go ahead. Laura, you need to unmute yourself.
I guess my question was going toward what you're saying. I mean, I could see this very much as a design for building communities. And maybe that's what we need to build communities, to help each other understand more about who we are and be able to take the design and look at our intuitions and deliberate about who we are and how we can begin to understand each other, work together to build, build our build out our community and create new, add communities together to build a new society, which I think we have to do.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Great observation. I mean, that is what, for example, these meetups are all about. We are people with all kinds of different backgrounds, from all kinds of different places, with all kinds of different views. And we are actually coming together and discussing things in a very open, respectful way. So the theme of these meetups is, exploration of the world, ourselves and ideas. I would replace now ideas with principles. What we're trying to, and by expanding the notion of community not just as, um, it's a kind of comprehensivist view of community, that there are these intersections between communities, but if you focus on the commonality, the idea of having, I mean, my original idea of coming up with this model was to make possible communication between people, where even when there is a disagreement, people are actually able to talk about the disagreement in a respectful way. So, so absolutely, I mean, that's definitely one of my deep motivations. Next up is Julie. Julie, what's your question?
If somebody hasn't deliberately said about any kind of design, how are they operating in this world?
Okay, that's a very good question. Um, so, design is, what is design? So the most I've learned about design is from the architects, basically. Louis Sullivan was the first one about whom. So the design is basically saying, design is the call to design is a very elevated cause. It is saying that, look, the world is very complex and you are very complex. There is a lot of things that can be done. Think about what your objectives are, what really matters to you, what are your functions, and try to come up with a structure that will achieve it. So it is the action of bringing together all the requirements, both physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, and making a structure out of it. Now, in order for our society to function at this scale, so now let's go back to the evolutionary stage. At the evolutionary stage, when we operate in a group of 30, not much, no, almost very little of this is really needed, because our brains are very large, and our ability to deal with a small number of people that we know very well is superb. So we are able to collaborate a lot just using the intuitions and actions without much deliberation, with very little deliberation, because the context isn't changing that much. But when the scale of civilization keeps increasing, when you have even the first cities, that mode of operation is no longer sufficient, because that mode of operation is the operation that works well only with people that you know very well, small number of people that you know very well. Moment you want to take the benefit of operating in a larger civilization, you need structures, you need forms. So for example, writing is one of them. Things like religions, you know the social structures. There are a whole bunch of things that come in at the same time. Accounting systems. All of these are ways of providing larger structure. Now, the um, so that is the need for design, to make possible a scale of action that was not possible at our evolutionary stage. That's what design makes possible. Now your question was, what if a person does not do that? Now, first thing I would say is that they have to say thanks to those who are doing it, because that's what is making their life much above our evolutionary stage. All of that, like the people who are keeping this economy going, this civilization going, there is a lot of work that has to happen for that to happen. For example, principles, books are kind of parts of design, of saying these are the principles by which you live. This is how you build a power plant. All of those things are designs, and that is what is giving us the electricity. That is how they're putting together logistics of getting food to you. That is the logistics, that is the invention that has made possible our long lives. So all of that is based on design. So the more you do it, the more you're contributing to this process. So that's what I would say. Next up is going to be Dave, Kevin, and John. Dave, go ahead. Dave, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry for the delay there. Yeah, I noticed the individual is inside the society or the civilization. And I think that is as it should be. We're governed by our traditions, rules, and peer pressure. But I want to bring up the idea that the individual can change society, can change the world. And the example I would give is computers. 50 years ago, when I was in college, a computer
Sure.
took
Let me take it at this level. Okay, let's just take questions. Your beautiful question. What
Okay.
you're saying is that the society provides a a framework for an individual, but individual can change society. And I fully agree. I mean, this diagram is actually talking about that it's not one way, it is both ways. So your actions are influencing. So if you look at the red circles, those are your actions. Your actions are impacting actions of other people. Your deliberations are impacting. So there is not just it's individual is not just taking things in. There is a continuous dialogue, continuous negotiation going on between individuals and the commonly held notions, commonly held designs, commonly held intuitions, commonly held ways of deliberation, common actions, and they are being, incessantly transformed. Better the society, more space there is for individual to transform it. Older societies, more primitive societies, the society dominates the individual. America is a break from that, where the idea that individual is the primary and this government and social forms exist to make individual action possible. That is a radical notion, a very powerful notion. So absolutely, individual does transform, and that has been the history, not just for computers, but again and again. If you have to go back, some of the initial stages have been lost because in prehistory, there's a part of kind of anthropologies. I'm sure there are individuals involved in invention of writing, zero, coming up with zero in mathematics, and across the board, including computers. So excellent point, Dave. Next up is Kevin, John, and Jim. Kevin.
Thank you, Srikanth. My question is, what's the order with actions, intuitions, and deliberation? It's by order, or let's say I take a principle on action, then operate freely for the intuition, then get feedback from deliberation, then put an action again. It's like this kind of circle.
Sure. Excellent. So the question is, what is the order of actions here? So firstly, there is energy moving along each of the axes. Okay, so there is kind of back and forth, the feed forward and feedback between going between all of these things. And now I think there is individual variation also amongst people about what comes first to them and what comes next to them. So there is that as well. So there is tremendous amount of variability, I think, from person to person and from context to context. So for example, if you're operating in a context, let's take just one given person. For one given person who is operating in a context which is very familiar to them, the way in which so they would be kind of mostly, the design has been tested already. So there is kind of intuitions and actions are mostly running it very easily. There is not that much deliberation taken place because a lot of deliberation already has taken place. But every time there is a surprise, it will kick into the deliberation in a very big way. If you're starting something new, then you don't have much intuitions about it. You have a lot of deliberation going on when you're trying to design. When you're doing, when you've reached a testing stage, maybe the actions are more prominent. So there is, this is very dynamic of how this operates within people. And the patterns of actions are also different based on kind of individual proclivities. Some people, they rely a lot more on intuition. Some people rely a lot more on deliberation. And of course, they will gain by having a little bit more of the other people, other function. The second thing I would say is that you can also work with people. If you know that you're strong on one things and weak on another things, you can work in teams to kind of compensate somewhat and learn somewhat from the other people on the other strengths. So it has that, so it's very dynamic, it is very flexible, and it varies from person to person and from situation to situation. Next up is John and Jim. John, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Srikanth, for presenting this. So I'm just sort of trying to wrap my head around these terms and come to terms with them. And so when I see design and I see deliberate and intuition, these are sort of like uh, these sort of connotate to me something higher level, like, you know, you're designing a building or designing a car, designing a school. But I'm wondering if this actually, like, design actually has a more fundamental meaning in that if this could be applied to sort of more sort of things we do every day, like mental models, you know, like, is design, could it be thought of as how we build our mental models, in that, you know, we sort of are creating these, we're constantly creating these conceptual models of reality as we go through life, and we're constantly tweaking them, and they're dying or degrading, and and can it be thought of on a fundamental level, as well as we sort of have uh you know, mental models or designs of what society is, or who our friends are, or, you know, what our career is, or what we're going to eat for breakfast, and um these things too are involve deliberations, actions, and intuitions. So I just wanted to see if,
Absolutely. So your question is, the concept of design, does it apply to things like buildings, or does it apply to things like mental models? And absolutely, it applies to things like mental models. But fundamentally, I'm looking at design. See, I've always struggled to come up with terms for this, and I've kept changing terms for this, because it's a question of how do you capture all of what human beings do in just 4 words. That's the problem that I've been trying to deal with. But design, so let me go ahead and elaborate on it, because of all these 4 things, this concept of design is the most complex, and it stands kind of right at the center there. So let me quickly hit the other 3. Actions, I think most people understand physical actions better than all these other 3. The Daniel Kahneman has done a fantastic job of separating the nature of intuitions and deliberations. So this is just system 1 and system 2. Okay, that's the best way to understand it. If you have not read the book, Thinking Fast and Slow, please do. I think it's very, very deep. And that's kind of the base of most of our meetups. We kind of take that for granted. Many of us do, because we have gone through that very systematically. Now, the concept of design is the most complex of it. So what is design? Design is basically anything that you put together that brings together um, your plan. So I have alternatively called it purpose, plan, or principles. It would also include mental models in that, because what is a mental model? Mental model is saying, this is what I need to do. This is how things operate, and I'm going to act based on this model. So most definitely, like, mental models belong here. And also, I'm always think of these as being um, integrated. So it's not a question of just designing this one thing. This, to have this kind of a central place, there is kind of a design of design. So, like, you have to have a plan for your life, and then within specific things, there are kind of specific plans that are connected with that. You have your principles, and then there are kind of sub principles behind that you have kind of this general model. So this is my model of trying to understand. So this is definitely a design. This itself, this diagram is a design. This is something that is holding, this is my way of guiding my actions. This is the result of all my intuitions. This is the result of all my deliberations. So it is, the function of a design is to bring together all your deliberations and intuitions, and to have something which you can use to guide your actions. And this is dynamic. So you can look at it, if you want, in 3D. So in the axis coming out of the page, you have growth. So you have, different actions coming in. Your designs become more and more powerful over time. So you can think of it, the other axis, the z-axis, as being the progress. So it's like a spiral. You're running across these various things to say. So John, this is a very good question. I don't know, did I answer your question?
Yes, you did. I wasn't sure what answer I was looking for, but I think you gave it.
Okay,
Thank you
thanks.
very much.
Thanks. Next up is Jim.
Yeah, I'm struggling with the idea of intuitions in the civilization context.
Mhm.
So it's clear to me that actions influence the world and can be collaborative with the world. Deliberations can be collaborative with the world. Intuition is a very personal thing, so it's influenced by the rest of the world, but the rest of the world doesn't know anything about my intuitions until I deliberate with them or take action on it. So I'm just trying to understand that
Sure.
intersection.
Sure. Wonderful question. So now intuitions are internal, but the fact is that let's take the simple example of you interacting with another person. So you have your intuitions, which is the yellow on the inner circle, and the other person has their intuitions, which is on the outer circle. And
Okay.
what I'm saying is that if you want to grow faster, you have to be open to the intuitions of the other people. What are the kind of implicit things that are holding things together? What are the kind of, so this is like the soft version. There are people, they will not explicitly tell you something, but you can kind of see it in their face, or you can verbalize those intuitions. So they start as intuitions. So just like you have intuitions of your own, everybody has intuitions of their own. And then there is some kind of commonality between intuitions. Like if you go to a culture, you can kind of see that they take certain kinds of things as given. So these are the intuitions that are there in the culture, and that vary from place to place. As an immigrant, I think one big advantage I have is that I've moved from one culture to another, where one culture thought certain things were completely normal, and this is how things are. And you go to another culture, they also think that there are these whole things but they're completely different. So there is something like intuitions of a culture that are kind of taken for granted. And these are different, and it's important to be cognizant of them, because intuitions many times have captured something about reality that has not yet been fully explicated. And that would probably and once it is explicated, it gets into deliberations, it gets into designs. So for example, the common form in which valuable intuitions get into design is through art. So somebody like Michelangelo constructing David during Renaissance, that's an intuition about what a human being can be, which is so dramatically different from the Middle Ages, whose view of man is kind of an abject creature, kind of cowering in the world. That he was able to put it directly into design. I don't think he had a deliberation about it, or he certainly did not offer that, but he did offer the design. And you could go back and you could say, this is the design, so that you can see that there are two circles inside the design. So the outside circle would be part of what Michelangelo has offered a person if you're living at that age. And then you would let your intuition would have to take in that from intuition. What does this mean about human beings? And then maybe deliberate about it to kind of rework your view of human beings, so you could come back to your design, which is the smaller circle. So that's what I mean. Is that clear?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the concept of mind mapping, which is a uniquely human ability to intuit what somebody else is thinking, right? So I know what I'm
Excellent.
thinking, and I think I know what you're thinking.
Yes.
And you know that I know what you're thinking, kind of that kind of interaction without using words.
Excellent. Next up is Francoise.
Okay. Looking at the four basic major functions, I was wondering if they are indispensable to work together, or if when we miss one, is there something wrong? When something goes wrong, is it because one of those functions is missing?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you need all of them. At the same time, you're not going to be strong at all of them. So that's why we do live in a society, and kind of partnering with other people in whatever form at a personal level or professional level is a good way of handling that. The good thing about something like this is your simple awareness of it. The starting point of it, there are these 4 stages, the unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and unconscious competence. So if you do not have even a sense that you are missing something, then you are at the level of the unconscious incompetence. You do not even know that you're weak at something, that you're missing something. Once you know it, that's a huge step that requires tremendous amount of courage. Then you have the step of saying, either figuring out, that's hard work of going to conscious incompetence, of either training yourself or working with somebody else to do that. And over time, you have a system that works. Either you have built that in yourself, or you've figured out a way of working with other people so that net result of your working team is effective. Does that answer the question?
Yes, certainly it does. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Françoise. Next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead. You're written a question up. Okay, next question is from Laura. Laura, what's your question?
Not so much a question, maybe. I was looking at this feeling like this is like a quantitative model for qualitative functions, kind of. Like these things, deliberations, intuitions, actions, the things that we're talking about are kind of qualitative in nature, but you're quantifying them using this graph. So it gives you, like, for research, perspective, it would give you a way of defining what you're talking about. When you talk about qualitative things, it's often kind of soft and stuff, but this really gives you a strong foundation on which you can discuss your qualitative thinking.
Excellent. Thank you. That's very useful, Laura. Let me just, I'm a big fan of trying to convert, trying to convert all of everything that you're doing into kind of quantitative terms. So one of the things that we did, for example, when we were studying Ray Dalio's book, he has a different system. It was, he has this cycle of kind of setting goals, facing problems. So what we did was that I got together with friends. It was about, I think, 4 of us who know each other very well and who are very good friends. We have a great level of trust. And we tried to kind of, there are these 5 stages of the cycle. We tried to evaluate ourselves on each of those 5 stages. How good am I at setting goals? How good am I at, facing problems? How good am I at, coming to the root cause of problems? How good am I at planning? How good am I at execution? So everybody kind of evaluated themselves. And then we did something very interesting. We actually asked each other to evaluate ourselves. So it's like I would ask, the other guy saying, okay, what do you think? Where do you see me? And then they would have their own. And it was a very interesting exercise, because what happens, we did a scale of 1 to 4 to do that. It was very interesting to see kind of the commonalities and differences. So one thing that I realized, I thought that I was not very good at facing my problems, but everybody thought I thought I was 2. Everybody thought I was 4. So I said, what's going on? Why do you think I'm good at this? Well, what had happened is that I identified this as a weakness 2-3 years ago, and I had been working on it relentlessly, and I'd not realized that I'd made some progress on it. So things like that, or places where I thought I was strong, other people would say it's not necessary that they are going to be right. So you have to have a conversation to make sure that there is that you actually understand. And the most funniest thing was that there was one person who looked at his ratings as opposed to his ratings of other people versus their own ratings, and noticed that his ratings were completely off from other people's ratings of themselves, as well as their friends' ratings of them. And then he looked at all of those numbers and said, wait a minute, I cannot really know what's going on with other people. My ability to do that is very poor. See, this is the way, though it's a very simple system, it allows you to do this kind of comparative analysis to do that. And I think that kind of takes you forward. Let me see. Give me just a second here. All right. Next question is from Michael. Michael, go ahead. Come back to me, a bit noisy where I am. Okay. Michael, whenever you're ready, you can just go ahead and type exclamation mark, and I'll come back to you. All right. So let me go ahead to the principles now. So the first one I was talking about, and we can come back to anything that you want. You can just go ahead and type in exclamation mark, and whenever there is a good stopping point, I will, or a good break point, I will go ahead and take your questions. Okay. So the first one is to broaden your concept of R's. Okay. The second one is the design principle. This is my favorite principle of all. This is a principle I found most useful in my life, and that's form follows function. This is by Louis Sullivan. I've done 3 meetups on this. And so just search for Louis Sullivan on 52 Living Ideas YouTube channel, and you'll find it. This is profound. Again, as a plug for Louis Sullivan, his book is Kindergarten Chats. That's what I would start with. I was so impressed by it, is that I bought 32 copies for everybody. I found that 1/3 of people did not get it, so I rewrote the whole book, re-edited the book, and put it on my blogs. So that's something. So form follows function is the kind of the core design principle that I use. I keep on asking myself, the way to use it is to say, okay, what's the function? What am I trying to do? And what that does is that it's very easy to get focused on the design that you have. So you have a design, and you have to be very hard with yourself and saying, what is the function? What am I trying to do? And how well is this doing, actually achieving it? And if you keep asking that question, all your intuitions, all your deliberations, you are able to leverage them in order to keep improving the design. A lot of people, for various reasons, a lot of the problems come when people grab onto the form that somebody else has produced and use it mindlessly, because it doesn't require much effort at that point. But over time, all of these are all living things. They deteriorate over time. So to be alive to life is to be alive to functions. And that means you have to be relentless in kind of reforming or restructuring in order to make sure that your functions are being met. So that's what the second principle is about of design. Now on actions, the best principle I have right now. So again, for what are these principles? What I'm trying to do is that this is the principles project. I'm trying to master principles for myself. Okay, I don't think I'm particularly good at it, and I'm trying. This is the best thing I have. This model is the best thing I have that I've developed through everything that I've done. My study of Carl Jung, my study of Daniel Kahneman, my study of kind of social things, trying to modify it. And the challenge is to kind of keep it very, very simple. And this is my simplest diagram for it. And these are my simplest principles that I know. These principles I've formulated very recently, and I'm sure that over time they're going to be updated. But this is what I have for now. So the next one is on actions, is act on principles. So the question is, what else can you do? Oh, there are many other things you can do. You can act based on habits. Those are mostly governed by your intuitions. That's what most people do. Most of what they do is habitual. That's not necessarily wrong, as long as you are aware of what the original design was. Um, so what this principle is saying, act on principles, is that act according to your designs. And if you need to kind of modify the actions, then go back and look at the design and modify the design, because design gives you like a conceptual guide to your actions and modify. So it's like, this is what I learned from mostly from military science, is separation between planning and acting. So there is this one of my favorite books on military science. What they did was that they had, the way they operated is that they always had two headquarters, blue team and red team. So what they would do is that the blue team would be in charge on one day, and they would be directing action based on its plan. During that time, during that entire day, the red team would be making the plans for the next day. Okay, just making plans, not modifying any actions at all. Next day, the red team would start with the plan that they had formed the previous day and start executing that, whereas blue team would go into the planning mode. So this kind of shifting between plan and action is a very powerful way of operating. And it allows you to kind of change plans over time. And it allows, it's a way of leveraging the thinking that you can do without interrupting the process of action. The principle number four, um, is intuitions. So what is the principle regarding intuitions? I currently, the best thing I have is let your intuitions operate freely. Most people inhibit the intuitions for various reasons. They say, okay, you know what, everybody is doing things this way. That's saying that there are designs that society has, so I'm going to not look at my intuitions as the result of it. Or these are my designs, so I'm going to not look at my intuitions. Otherwise, they, as soon as their intuitions start forming something which is different from what they are used to, they kind of bring in the critical deliberation, and that kind of clamps up any kind of creative new thoughts that they could, their intuitions can produce. So I think being open, listening to your intuitions is very important, and letting them kind of come in freely without inhibition. And then you can shift. There is a one meetup I've done on shuttling between the deliberation and intuition, creative faculties in writing, and how you can write very fast using that. I've done this meetup. I recommend that as an example of that. So that's on intuition. Now on deliberation, this may be just words for many people, but I think this is the best way I have of capturing it, is use Bayesian thinking to update your priors. So what does that mean? So I'm going to explain it in English. At some point I want to do, I've done meetups in person in New York on this 2 or 3 times, but I've not done one that's on YouTube. At some point I have to do this. So what is Bayesian thinking? Bayesian thinking is all about realizing that your purpose of your ideas is to predict what is going to happen. And you act on the best ideas that you have. Be very conscious of what you're expecting as a results. And then whenever you get new results, you use that to update your ideas. Update priors means the ideas that you held previously. It also, another principle of Bayesian thinking is to say that you have to be always open to the possibility that you're wrong. So you think that something is true 95%, but there is 5% chance that you may be wrong. And then there are all kinds of biases that we have, like confirmation bias, where you only look for things that will support your position. You should be on the premise of saying, if I'm wrong, what would I expect to see? So there are kind of systematic ways of acting on our cognitive biases. And I think that's a very powerful idea of deliberation. So, but again, I'm not very happy with this principle. I think maybe on deliberation, I hope to elaborate a lot on each of those things. But this is the kind of the most concise formulation that I could come up with for this presentation. Michael, your voice is back, so go ahead.
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, it was very noisy all of a sudden where I was, but now I'm in a quiet area.
Go ahead.
I was giving thought to this model as it relates to the highest performers of our age and of all time, and I'm wondering. So things came to mind like they probably have less dissonance, which relates to this model throughout their life. They probably have, or they may have an active role model who they're trying to model their design and who they so deeply believe that their design is extremely effective. And obviously there are other factors too, which I'm not going to get into, but with those two, aside from someone's health, their desire, and all those other factors, any thoughts on that?
I'm a very big fan of studying people who are very creative. I've spent a lot of time doing that. And what I've noticed is that the variation of the backgrounds is very large amongst these people. And these people are able to make the most of a structured situation, unstructured situation, uncertainties and certainties, good times and bad times. They manage to kind of leverage pretty much anything to their advantage. So I have seen tremendous variation on these. So I'm not sure. I don't have any kind of patterns that I know. Apart from the only commonality I see is internal. So internal things like that they are relentlessly designing things, they are relentlessly correcting themselves, they are very critical of themselves, they have tremendous amount of confidence in themselves, but they are always like the person I've studied most is Leonardo da Vinci. I mean, he's always saying, okay, firstly, did this get built? Did this get built? He's saying, okay, this is wrong. That's why there is this continuous kind of curiosity and not being kind of satisfied with how things are. That's one element of it. So I see most of the common factors that I see are internal as opposed to external. Any thoughts? I mean, I don't know whether that answers your question.
I mean, it was more open-ended.
Yeah.
I was thinking just like the relationship between deliberations and intuitions, which would influence the action. And I was thinking those that can shuttle back and forth faster probably have less dissonance. And I was trying to break down as to what the reasons perhaps would be for why how they got to that point of lesser dissonance.
Yeah, I mean, partly it is that. So firstly, that people are, what are the characteristics? So one characteristic is that they're incredibly curious. So they're taking in so much new information that they are used to it. So it's like dissonance is kind of, they take dissonance in their strides. So that's one large part of it. Second, they are ready to change. Like if they see something wrong, they are ready to change. So they're kind of less habitual. So I see tremendous amount of, those are the kinds of things that I see. Let's see. Let's see what else is going on here. We got, okay, let me go ahead and let me go to the last one, and then we will open it up to kind of final kind of questions. Now, and this is the last one, which is probably, so 6, what is the principle regarding yourself? And I think the most powerful principle I have found is the power of attention. The attention is your primary power, which activates or deactivates other things. Really, and this I learned from William James, that will is paying attention to difficult objects. That it is your ability to pay attention. You would be amazed of moment you start paying attention to something, regardless of what is going on, positive or negative, how much you can do stuff with it. And most of the time it's that you've not paid attention to it, or whenever you start paying attention to you realize that it has a negative impact. It's like a negative emotion or something like that. So you evade it, and it just remains what it is. So attention, I think, is the most, the greatest power that us as human beings have. So those are kind of the 6 principles that I have. So now I'm going to open it up for any general questions. Let's see how we are doing. 1:35. So any general questions? Otherwise, we'll do a quick breakout rooms and we will come back to share our takeaways. Again, just clarificatory questions. Otherwise, let's do breakout rooms, and then you can discuss what was presented amongst yourself for 20 minutes, and then you can come back and tell me what you thought. Okay, and I would appreciate feedback on any level. Let me go ahead and stop sharing. Let me start the breakout rooms. Give me just a second here. Okay, I'm starting the breakout rooms now. We'll be back in 20 minutes. And then you can either ask me, you can firstly tell me about your takeaways. And then you can also ask me one question, the most important question you have in your mind. Starting the breakout rooms now. Welcome back, folks. All right, it's time for takeaways. So I'm going to just call on people in the order in which I see them. So you can talk about what are you walking away with? That's number 1. And second is that if you have any questions, try to keep one question. So let's start with, I'm going to start with John, Brian, and Francoise. John, go ahead.
So sorry, I didn't catch that. Is it feedback or questions?
Yeah,
or
it's feedback. What are your takeaways? That's number 1. And if you have any questions, you can ask question. And then I'll collect all the questions and answer all of them.
Yeah. I think one of the things I really like about this model is how easy it is to apply it to some problems. And I think really fundamentally, models are just sort of tools or conceptual tools to solve particular problems. And I think like a model's worth is in how well it can solve problems for you. So a model that may be great for you may be terrible for me. And so there's a subjective aspect to models that I think often gets lost in the shuffle. When if I go and adopt Tony Robbins, path to success, and I don't do it well, I might not be on a path to success. So I think there's something relating back to the preconceptual, which I haven't really, that I'm still sort of wrapping my head around with models and how they relate to us as beings. But I thought this was a great exercise, and I hope you do more of these. So thank you.
No, I'm going to do it every week. So I'm going to do it. I'm going to take kind of different sets of principles and talk about them. So yes. Next up is Brian, Francoise, and Jairo. Brian.
Okay. It was a very interesting discussion, but I somehow feel we're still at the basic level. Looking at the model, it's very simplistic so far. I'm not sure how I would apply that. So I suspect you'll be developing that over the next few weeks, which I look forward to.
Okay, thank you. Next up is Francoise, Jairo, and Jim.
So it was quite good to deliberate in the chat room, how each of us was understanding the whole concept. But one question came to my mind is, I have no idea, and would you have an advice to find out what is our the strengths and weaknesses? When I see the four forms, I'm wondering how to find out, where I'm the strongest or the weakest. Would you have a way to find that, some exercise we could do, and then we can know better ourselves?
Excellent question. So I'll come to that. So I'm going to take all the questions and I'm going to answer all of them together. Next up is Jairo, Jim, and Dave. Jairo?
Question is, if I'm at intuitions, are you saying that it's favorable or more beneficial to go inwards into designs and combine it with deliberations, and the output would go up to actions, or is it also the possibility that from intuitions in your diagram, one swings around the outer circle, or it might be the my circle, and it goes directly and produces an action, and that would leave out deliberation, and it wouldn't go through design form. And
Sure. Okay. So looking at various ways in which you go through this from intuition. So I'll go ahead and address that. Very good. Next up is Jim, Dave, and Sharon.
Yeah, so today, looking at the model, one of the things that was really resonating with me is kind of how I'm designing my own future. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about, retirement and it's change in focus for me from career growth to, investing and thinking about where I want to live and the kind of places I want to visit and the kind of people I want to surround myself with. And all of these things do include intuition and deliberation and action and considering what's going on in the world economically, politically, and personal objectives and family considerations and all these things. So it's like, as I look at the model, a lot of these things were kind of turning in my head because it's very top of mind for me right now. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate that. Next up is Dave, Sharon, and Laura.
Thanks very much, Shrikant. Very good presentation and interesting model. I reflect the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So I enjoyed this step and I'll look forward to our step next week. Thanks again.
Thanks, Dave. Next up is Sharon, Laura, and Tom.
So I really enjoyed this, Shrikant. I thought it was exceptional the way you took some very complex ideas and really made them understandable. And they were particularly interesting because they helped me clarify something that I'm developing right now. So I appreciate it. No questions at this time. Thanks.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sharon. Next up is Laura, Tom, and Michael. Laura? Laura, you need to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay. I really like the form to function kind of thing. I would say some design and form to function. I think that way. And I really like this presentation. I like the model. I actually like all the models you've given us. I'd like to see how are they all going to connect in the end, all the models. Do you have an idea about that yet?
This is my sorry, I'm mute you because there is an echo. Basically, this is the best connection I have of. I think this integrates everything I've done so far, and I try to do it that way. Thank you. Next up is going to be Tom, Michael, and Claire. Tom?
Yeah, I just got back from getting my takeaway.
Oh.
But I managed to join the session while I was driving around Norway and getting my takeaway, which I thought was quite amazing.
Nice.
Thank you very much. I haven't seen this model before, so I don't understand it, but it did reinforce in me the idea that maybe more intuition and how we access that and how we listen to it is something that I should be thinking about. So while this is all going on, I ordered Kahneman's book, and it's in my Kindle file right now. I have to read up on him. Heard about him for a long time, about time to read him.
Absolutely. I recommend it very highly. He's done a brilliant job on this one. Thanks, Tom.
But one more thing. Jim, you see my email on my screen?
Yes.
Write to me and ask for the life design book. Maybe it will help you design your life. Free copy.
Next up is Michael, Claire, and Kevin. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, so the question is what factors allow for a design to be heavily influential or inspiring to the collective? And feedback point, I guess this is just a personal reflection that I saw strong overlap between a vision, more of a conscious vision, and the design point in the center. I don't know how you differentiate between those.
Can you repeat the last second point? I got the point about.
Yeah. So the first one was the question, and then the other one, I guess, which becomes a question, is the point in the middle of the design. I saw a very strong overlap between that and a vision, which you said plan, purpose, and I'm forgetting the other P I think you used.
Principles, yeah.
Principles, yeah.
Yep.
So I saw like a vision, but more of a consciously formed vision pertaining to the Mayan hour. So I was wondering what the differences were.
Okay, sure. So, where does vision fit in? Very good. Next up is Claire, Kevin, and Marco. Claire?
Thank you, Shrikant. I love this model. I think what's interesting when we all look at this together, especially people who haven't seen it before, is how when you find a new model, you immediately start trying to integrate it with your own life and pull in your own experiences and like process it internally, and how that is just human nature, but then also, doesn't serve to let us see this sort of at a distance. My question is, if we have time, I would love for you to just elaborate more on form follows function. It's one that I struggle with. Thanks.
Okay, wonderful. Form follows function. All right, thanks, Claire. Next up is Kevin, Marco, and Anna. Kevin?
Yes, this model definitely help my customize, think about how to develop my future and my life, and others. And my question is for you is, how do you come up with this module? Then let's see, what's alternative for those terms you labeled to intuition, deliberations, and actions? Then center design, where principle, come to all through for each term.
Wonderful. Thanks. Thanks, Kevin. Great questions. Next up is Marco, Anna, and Julie.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the presentation, and I'm kind of just glad that I'm finally getting a firm grasp of it from the original presentations.
Thank you. Thank you, Marco. Next up is Anna and Julie. Anna? Okay, next up is Julie. Julie, go ahead.
Hi. Yeah, I see that with my life, I should have been living my life as I wrote my thesis or my term papers, which I did very much like your Wednesday night lecture of shifting back and forth between my deliberation and my intuition. But with my life, I would live totally in my deliberation, reason, land of reason, and totally not access my intuition. And so at a late age, I am trying to open up to finding my more of a defined purpose by using that faculty of intuition. So it's kind of new, but intuition has led me to these meetups, for example, and I'm following, and it feels better, and it feels much more powerful than running by reason alone. I mean, I kind of had a flat career without any life to it because I chose it logically. And I think there's a magic in what you do because you can tell you're doing your passion. This is your gift. And I want that for myself. My question is on the principles. I'm not quite sure what they are. Are they truths that great thinkers have come up with that keep in mind, or are they values? I maybe next time get that clarified.
Sure. Okay, so let me go ahead and take, answer the questions. So let's start with Francois. Francois, your question about strengths and weaknesses. I have just developed this. I don't have a full test or anything like that. The best shortcut I have is the Jungian cognitive functions. So keys to cognition. Claire, could you type that in for that? The Jungian functions is the kind of the shortest version I have of that. And kind of coming back to the question that Kevin asks. So I'm inspired by several sources to kind of come up with this. One of the primary sources is Daniel Kahneman's idea of system 1 and system 2. And the second one is Carl Jung's ideas of the 4 functions of intuition, sensing, thinking, and feeling. And so this is kind of modified version of it. So it's kind of, both these are kind of models of psyche. And what I found lacking in them, what needs to be added to them, is the fact that we are social beings. So we interact with other people and we do things in our external life, which shapes, which we shape and which we are shaped by. So I had to add something external to it, so that I put action as a primary thing, and the design is something that goes between these things, of kind of taking input from your processing, internal processing, and gives you something to be done outside. So that is kind of the origin of it. And so I would, so Francoise, I would recommend taking the Keys to Cognition test. So if you go to keys2cognition.com/explore, that will give you the test to start. Again, I'm very, very skeptical about all tests, but talk to me, Francois. We can go from there. Next one is Jairo's question about intuition and how do you go from intuition? Where do you go from intuition? What happens is that if you're doing something that you are, intensely familiar with, something like walking, your intuition and actions are directly connected. There isn't that much of design that you need. There isn't that much of deliberation that you need. If your intuition is about something that adds something new to what you're doing, the difference of your design, then you need to kind of engage the deliberation. So it depends on the familiarity with it. And the whole purpose of the system 1 and system 2 is to kind of automatize things. So principles are your way, or your designs are your way of storing all the work that you have done and benefiting from it, while intuition is way of kind of seeing what is out there. How can you do something more and taking that in. So if you're operating in an area which you don't need anything more, it's already working very well, then intuition, at that point, your intuition's design and actions are very well synced to do that. But you have to be always aware, to be aware of your intuition. So there are different paths depending on the state of things. Now, answering Michael's question about what designs inspire other people, that's an excellent question. I mean, for example, religious text, like the Bible or Bhagavad Gita or things like that. Those are the ones, those are great examples of kind of designs which are created through intuition and deliberation that provide guide to action. So are, kind of pure works of art. There are kind of, national symbols, so, and on that, I think the person who has done most thinking is Carl Jung, who has studied kind of all mythologies and trying to see kind of patterns in them. The question is, why do they speak to us? Because that they talk about something which is very deep in us. So there are those things. So I think the best answers to that line of thinking is the Jungian concept of archetypes, and saying, why do certain things speak to so many? Why was Star Wars popular, and how it leverages kind of very old patterns that are there. The question of vision is kind of formed in intuition, but then it is kind of through deliberation, you can actually create a design. Like, for example, like Star Wars is a design, but it is inspired by visions. So visions kind of start in the intuition. They are kind of through deliberation built into design, and then they serves as ways of triggering intuitions in other people. That's what the function of art is. In terms of alternative terms, I have struggled with alternative terms all throughout, because I'm trying to, the whole purpose of this is to kind of be able to talk to people about any human thing, about all of human experience, regardless of where they are coming from, coming up with simple enough terms that we can communicate with each other. The different things, I've used different, like there is actions. The term with which I had the greatest trouble was the design term. So I've called it alternatively kind of planning, principles, because it is trying to kind of, it's an animal which combines everything. It takes in everything. It's a product of all your work and serves as a way to further guide. So that has been the most difficult one. But I think design, thanks to my study of systems with especially Buckminster Fuller, he uses this as a central concept in his thought. And so I'm reading a new book by him called, I think it's called Design Strategies or something like that. And I look forward to kind of developing that. And it was a kind of connection that's what Louis Sullivan was doing. The last one is about, let me see, about principles. So what are principles? I will go into details of this later on, but basically principles are general truths that serve as guides to action. And it's like principle can't be don't eat sugar. I mean, that's a principle, but it's a very low level principle. The principles that I'm talking about are general principles that allow you to guide your life. And there will be specific principles that will go beyond, but my focus is at the level of dealing with your whole life and dealing with all of people around you. So at a philosophical level. So I'm focused on the general principles. Again, this is the same concept that Buckminster Fuller has of principles. Now, somebody like Louis Sullivan is truly spectacular because he has just this one principle: form follows function. Okay, and he just takes everything through that. And that's what the power is. And I certainly think that's there. So I have put that in the center. So I'll talk briefly about form follows function, Claire, but I've done like a full video. I would recommend that. I don't know, Claire, have you seen that video that I did with, I cheated because it's very difficult. It's like, because I've lived with this principle for so long, I just take too many things for granted. So I decided to get help. I decided to get my friend Sherry Trasinski, who is an architect, and we did a joint presentation. We did two joint presentations. One was on form follows function, and the second one was a problem contains its own solution, which is a very, you've seen both of them?
No, I haven't watched the full video. And I mean, the architecture example makes it clear to me, right? That like the function of a column is to keep it up and the form is all the fancy stuff on top. But I just struggle with application. So I will definitely watch the video.
Yeah, so I would start with that because frankly, Sherry is far better at doing this. And we work very well as a team, because what we did was that I would put it in kind of general terms, and then she would pick up some examples of Louis Sullivan's designs, or she's very good at that. So I would recommend that. It's a very deep issue. I would also recommend, if you go to 52 Living Ideas, there is link to my old blog post where I've written everything about kindergarten chats, and so I would recommend that as well. And I would recommend just getting kindergarten chats. And that's the best way, because it's as I said, look at what it is trying to, look at the grandeur of the principle. It's trying to handle everything. It's trying to say, okay, if you have this one principle, if you actually can understand it and apply it, you can actually apply it everywhere. So he actually shows you how it is done. So what I would recommend is this, this is very profound. So Kindergarten Chats is the book where he's trying to explain it to a person who has graduated architecture school, and he's trying to explain to them how it actually works. Autobiography of an Idea is his own autobiography. I like the term, I like the title, Autobiography of an Idea, and it is this idea. So how did it come to be? How did he come up with this idea? And how did he apply it throughout his life? So that's the second thing. And the third one, which is my favorite, is called A System of Architectural Ornament, where he actually shows you in visual terms how it works. So those three are his books. The fourth one actually is, if you're more, it's called Democracy: A Man's Search, of saying what kind of life would we have if people actually understood these principles, if we lived to our full creative potential and a society was operating like that. What are the stops currently to it, and how do you make it happen? So those are the 4 books I would recommend very highly. But Claire, I'm going to have to leave it at that for now. Okay. All right. Okay, so that was this. I really like this. So this series I'm going to continue on principles. Next, I'm planning to take up Jordan Peterson. He has got these 48 principles. That was the original post on Quora that really moved. That was kind of the source of his book 12 Rules for Life. So I'm thinking of taking that up. I'm considering everything, but I work during the week to figure out what's the most challenging thing I can do next on this series, and I will have something next week.